gaming is in trouble. Now, what do I mean by that? It's officially the day after the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, which I did watch completely and fully. And wow, a lot of things that got me excited. A lot of things do not have me excited, namely the pricing of the games themselves. Out of everyone else in the gaming industry, I think Nintendo themselves has the edge over everybody else, and it's for this fact and this fact alone, and that is the new Game Share feature, which actually is an old feature. If any of you were there back whenever the 3DS was still selling, there's this feature called Download Play, and what Download Play would do is basically what Game Share does. Is that it would allow you to download data from whatever game your friend was playing. It was always in a multiplayer setting. You would get, in order to do multiplayer on a single game with a single cartridge, Download Play was a feature that was offered up by Nintendo, where your friends, if they had another 3DS system, they could download the information from the one cartridge, and you could play the same game together, and that's how multiplayer worked that way, without having to have the same copy of that game. And the thing about Download Play itself is that it was usually like a disadvantage where like you couldn't pick your character or something like that. And I don't know if it's going to be the same thing with Nintendo Switch 2's Download Play. But basically what I'm saying, because the Game Share is a feature, that makes $70 game worth significantly more than, say, $70 PlayStation 5 game, because $70 PlayStation 5 game, you still got to have another PlayStation, and your friend has also got to have their own version of the game too, because that's how it's always worked. That's how it's always worked in the gaming industry, and the Switch 2 is going to be the exception. It's going to be the first one where you don't have to have a copy of the game. You won't have to have your own copy for specific titles in order to able to play multiplayer. And the new thing with Game Share is that it's also going to have online Game Share. So unlike the 3DS, you don't have to be local in order to download the information. You can do it over online now. So you don't even have to be physically there anymore. You can just be over like 2 cities or whatever away, and like you can be able to access the Game Share that way. Now, Game Share makes it to where a $70 game, multiplayer game, is significantly more valuable because of that, as opposed to a PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X game. But it's still a problem because regardless of all that, people can't afford $70 video games. It doesn't matter where you are. I don't care how you feel about the economy. I don't care how you feel about technology or how much game development costs. It just isn't doable, which is my next point and the whole reason I'm making this video. Game development has just gotten too expensive. It's taking too much time. Games that used to be enough, like games that used to be like a 200-hour experience, used to be able to be made in about 3 to 4 years. They're now taking twice as long. It's now taking about 6 to 8 years for a AAA game now. Games are getting more expensive, and because of that, the price tag is going up, and everybody is suffering for it. Everybody's wallet is taking a hit, and AAA games just aren't sustainable like they used to be. In order to make your money back, you're going to have to sell. The now standard, you got to be able to sell 10 million copies of that game. And it has to be priced at $60 or more now. And $60 used to be like ridiculous for people. But like everybody eventually got used to it. But like I was there whenever it was first $60. Like nobody wanted to buy a $60 game. Now that it's $70, it's going to be the exact same thing. Except this time the economy is way worse than it was whenever everything was $60. And that's where everything is going to take a crash. Everything is going to take a hit because of that. The Nintendo Switch 2, by itself, there's no like concrete evidence that it's going to cost this much. I think there was like some sort of website that was listing it for around $450. But I don't think that that's like listed on Nintendo's website. I think that was an entirely different thing. Whereas the Nintendo Switch 2 and Mario Kart World Bundle is going to be $500. The base game is going to be $80. Which $70 is bad, $80, so much worse. So much worse, people. Because of that, nobody's going to want to buy AAA games anymore. That's just where it's at. It's taking so long to make games now. And games are so expensive now that there's a new direction, though. Indie games are where everything is going to go now. Unless the industry can somehow catch up significantly and realize that. Nobody wants to pay $70 for a game. There's a ton of nostalgia. There's a big market in indie games. The problem is that indie games have fit into this very specific archetype, this very specific niche. When people hear indie games, used to be there were these crazy, weird games that cost $5 that may take an hour to beat. Nowadays, an indie game can take upwards of 100 hours to beat, depending on what it is. And that's the other problem, is that indie games also take just as long to develop as AAA games, but they're not spending as much money on indie games. They don't have to pay as many people on indie games. And because of that, they can afford to make it significantly cheaper. But like I said, indie games are fitting into this very specific archetype and niche. What do I mean by that? There is the indie game look. Don't tell me you don't know what that is, because you know what that is. It's these pastel colors. It's very minimal textures, very minimal shading. That is the indie game look. And it is not a good look for the market. If indie games are going to be able to take over the AAA market, they're going to have to start to look more like AAA games. Which is very difficult because of the fact that in order to get the AAA look, you gotta spend a lot of money, time, energy, and resources in order to get it looking as high definition as possible. What indie developers don't realize is that AAA games did not used to look like they do today. AAA games used to look like they did on Xbox 360. Xbox 360, I think, was the era of AAA gaming. That is whenever the kind of standard for AAA games started. That's whenever games got 3 times as big. That's whenever games started to look high definition. But if you look at an Xbox 360 game today compared to a Xbox Series X game, it looks really low quality. If you let it look low quality. Because back then, it was the next generation. It was high definition. It was as good as gaming was going to get. That's where I think indie games need to start leaning towards. I think they need to start leaning towards the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 look. But not every developer is going to be able to afford that because, once again, it's expensive. It's not as expensive to make as it was back then, but it still is kind of expensive, especially if you don't know what you're doing. If you don't understand the AAA game pipeline, if you don't understand things like PBR materials, because that era is whenever stuff like PBR materials started to become a thing, where PBR materials started to add a lot more texture, a lot more depth to environments, and things like ambient occlusion, light maps, reflection maps, all that jazz. Not every indie developer can afford that. That's why just take it a step back. Just take it a generation back. Go to the GameCube. Go to the PlayStation 2. Go to the Xbox era. Nobody's making games that look like that. Why? The PlayStation 2 was considered, at one time, one of the greatest systems of all time, and it's still the second best-selling game system of all time. Why aren't people making any games that look like the PlayStation 2? Indie developers, this is your call to action right now. You need to start making games that look like PlayStation 2 and GameCube games. soon as possible. If you still can't do that, aim for like Nintendo 64 look. I've seen a couple of Nintendo 64 looking games pop up recently, and I love them, but there's just not enough of them, and like people aren't aware. The only one of those that I've played so far, Kiwi 64, that was the one. I played Kiwi 64, and like it's a good game. It's just too short. But if it was like, say, the length of Donkey Kong 64, I think that would be a great game. I think it could easily sell like 10 million copies on $20 a piece. Like, there's where you need to go, guys. And that's where I intend to go with my stuff. I want to be able to recreate that Xbox 360 era of gaming or whatever. Like, that's what we need to go to. That's where gaming needs to end up. You indie developers, you're the ones who shall take over the industry if you just lean towards the right areas. The AAA gaming industry is on the brink of collapse. When it does, indie games are going to be where everybody turns to. Every so often, people will buy a big AAA game. Like, everybody's going to buy the next Zelda. Everybody's going to buy the next Mario. Of course, everybody's going to buy Mario Kart. And everybody's going to buy Smash Bros. But, like, not every game has that luxury of being a big brand household name. Just look at Pokemon. Nobody is happy with anything that Game Freak has made recently. But Pokemon is such a big brand name. They are selling more copies of Pokemon game than they have ever in the history of the series. Even though they're making games that people like less than any other games in the series. Just because of their brand alone. That's how powerful branding is. And that's where you start building up your brand. Like, start from scratch. Like, start with the most basic of games. Like, build your brand. It doesn't have to look like a AAA game. It just has to look good. There's so many N64, their Dreamcast games, PlayStation 2 games. They look good. They look old, but they look good. All you have to do is make it look good, and you got to make the game as of excellent quality as possible. Graphics aren't everything. People are tired of the graphics war. So stop leaning towards the graphics and start making actual games. Start making games that look good, feel good, and become experiences that people never forget. Needless to say, I'm looking forward to the Switch 2. I'm not looking forward to what it's going to do to me financially. I'm hopeful for the future, but that future does not belong to the big corporations anymore because they can't sustain themselves. The future belongs to the indie market, and it belongs to any indie developers that can take advantage of this platform to be heard, to be recognized, and to be given a chance. Because now more than ever, people are going to give indie developers a chance like they never did before, especially if their game is good and if their game is affordable. Because if you try to charge everybody as much money as the corporations are charging, they're not going to buy your game, regardless of how good it is. You may even have to make your first 2 games at a loss just so that you can get some exposure. But as long as your game is good, people will keep coming. And eventually that loss will eventually turn into a profit, as long as you made your game right. And but just remember, you're not going to be able to satisfy everyone. Lean into your genres. Don't try to make an action game and appeal to visual novel gamers. Don't try to make an FPS and appeal to platform gamers. Try to stick to your genre. That's the other key. Like, make your genre fun. If you want to make an FPS, just make it the best FPS that has ever been made. Make this an FPS that makes other people who don't play FPSs go like, hey, that game looks fun. I want to play that. That's the other thing. Visually, your game needs to look fun to play. Because in this era of streaming, people value how fun that game looks to play over everything else. So whenever you're making your game, visually, it just has to look good and it has to look fun to play. So make sure you're testing with people. Like, I want you to go play your game, and I want you to play it in front of other people, and then ask them, how fun does this look to play? And if they say, yes, it does look fun to play, that's when you know you've done it right. But if people are like, I don't know, that's whenever you've done it wrong. That is the key to making a game that will sell. One, you got to make it look fun to play. Two, you got to make sure that it's appealing to as broad an audience as possible. Like, don't make it too weird unless that's the audience you're specifically aimed at. Like, Undertale and Deltarune has got a vast, giant audience because of its weirdness. Just remember, do your market research and take advantage of this opportunity in this current market that we are totally headed towards. I don't know if I'm going to do videos like this in the future, but let me know if you like them. And y'all have a great week, and I will be trying to post more consistently. We'll see. I've been really busy with a lot of different things. I've been working on a game with my brother. That's been a lot of work, and a lot of things are coming in the future, so look forward to what I'm going to be doing. I will see you all later.